Ryan Brown here of J. Ryan Brown Law, and today we're going to talk about one of the most serious crimes in the entire state of Georgia, and that is aggravated child molestation. We're going to talk about what kind of conduct the statute prohibits, what the punishments are, and whether or not there's any exceptions. Okay? Some of this stuff can be hard to read. We're going to go through it step by step, so just bear with me. So let's first start with the two types of conduct that the aggravated child molestation law prohibits in Georgia. First, it's useful to know what is child molestation, and then we'll get into knowing and learning what makes it aggravated, right? Which is obviously some sort of indicator that it's even worse. So child molestation is an immoral or indecent act committed to a child or in the presence of a child, right? Now, what makes aggravated child molestation different than what we just talked about? There's two ways that child molestation can grow and become worse and become aggravated child molestation. The first is that if an act of child molestation, so an immoral or an indecent act to a child or in the presence of a child, causes physical injury to that child, then it can become aggravated child molestation. The second way is if that immoral or indecent act committed to or in the presence of a child involves an act of sodomy, then that becomes aggravated child molestation. What does sodomy mean? Sodomy in Georgia, in the context of these sex crimes, means either oral sex or anal sex. So a child molestation charge that involves an act of oral or anal sex can become aggravated child molestation. There is a interviewing technique that law enforcement officers use when investigating these crimes that gets people to confess to aggravated child molestation. They will interview a defendant, tell them that it is a child molestation interview, and say, but I bet you only had oral sex, not vaginal sex. Isn't that right? And a defendant, unsuspecting, thinking that oral sex is not as serious of a charge as vaginal sex, will say, yes, you're right. And before you know it, they just confessed to committing an act of sodomy while committing child molestation, which is aggravated child molestation. Why is that so important? Because of the punishment. Aggravated child molestation in Georgia is one of the 7 deadly crimes. There are 7 crimes in Georgia. There are things like murder, aggravated child molestation, armed robbery, aggravated sodomy, things of this nature that carry a range of punishment of 25 to life. That is a minimum of 25 years in prison, not eligible for parole actually unless you get sentenced to life, and then after 30 years you may be. Harsh laws. There is an exception to this, and it's a common sense exception that's not always been around. We call it the Romeo and Juliet exception. It stems from a case in Douglasville involving a young man named Gennaro Wilson. Mr. Wilson was a high schooler who engaged in consensual oral sex with another high schooler and received 10 years in prison for doing so. And back in the day, the crime was punishable by a minimum of 10 years. It's changed since then. If this would have happened now, without this exception, it would have been a minimum of 25 years in prison. Now, we're dealing with a couple scenarios that can involve this exception. First of all, the defendant has to be 18 or younger. Okay, we're dealing with a defendant who is less than or equal to 18. We're dealing with an alleged victim in the case that is either 13, 14, or 15. Okay, if the victim in the case is 16, that's the legal age of consent. There's no child molestation, right? Child molestation in Georgia, someone under the age of 16. At 16, that's the legal age of consent in Georgia. They do have to be within 4 years, though. So a defendant could be 18, alleged victim could be 13. That's aggravated child molestation. However, if the victim is 14, the defendant is 18, they're within those 4 years. To be better would be 15 and 18. Still illegal. It is still illegal. It is, however, punished as a misdemeanor as opposed to a 25 to life felony. So that is important. The other important thing is this only involves an act of child molestation that involves sodomy, not physical injury. So, we're dealing with a consensual type, even though someone under 16 in Georgia can't legally consent. We're talking about this area here, resulting in the Romeo and Juliet law being implicated. It's very serious, obviously, one of the 7 deadlies. We don't have to say that. If you know someone that's under investigation, or if you believe you may be under investigation for this crime, or if you've been arrested for it, text us, call us. whatever's more convenient for you. Our phone number is 470-635-1725. Again, Ryan Brown of J. Ryan Brown Law. We'd be more than happy to chat with you.